There's a moment when the sun disappears, when darkness falls and you're left with just your fears. That's the moment you feel your first pang of doubt. That's the moment when the night comes out. When the Night Comes Out presents Redo, Part 2. It's amazing how far people will go to gain power. Power over other people, power over their memories. Some power is too much for humans to wield. You'll find this is especially true when we rejoin the mystery, when the night comes out.
Hello, my name is Laura Lee Bowling. When you get this, I am either out of the country or dead. I have to face the fact and say it out loud that there's a good chance I won't be alive by the time you see this. I've tried to make plans and account for everything, but the people I'm dealing with are very powerful, and they will come after me. They will kill me. So, where do I start? I was working in the marketing department at Gentech. If you aren't familiar with the company, they're the people behind Redo. Redo is one of the most popular new pieces of technology among the wealthy. It makes this company billions of dollars, and the demand keeps growing. I was very excited to have this job, and it was a magnificent job. However, a few months ago, while I was looking for a file to post to social media on our shared drive, I came across a folder I had never seen before. They labeled it as Redo 5, which indicated to me it might be specs for the latest model. I thought I might just sneak a peek at it. I opened the file and came across horrifying information. So horrifying, I quickly began copying it. An hour after I found it, the file was password protected and I got kicked out. I quickly downloaded the information to a drive and brought it home. What I found out is that Gentech is involved in so many things when it comes to Redo. They're doing experiments, a lot of them for the government, but a few of them unknown by the government. Secret stuff. They're experimenting with people's lives wherever and whenever they can. They're trying to turn Redo into a weapon, but they're also trying to find a way to control people's minds. Oh, and when I say the company's doing work for the government, well, it's not just the U.S. government. The system is not as secure as they want you to believe. There are ways to implant ideas and change memories to affect people's actions in the real world. There are also ways to put people into comas, or alter their memories enough they can believe something that never happened actually did. Supposedly, Gentech is working with people who have serious mental health issues to cure them. Perhaps they are, but they're also trying to see if they can turn mentally ill people into weapons. People who can kill on command and be directed to go after a particular person, then just return to the mental ward. They're doing things to people right now. Oh, and the whole Redo syndrome? Yeah, it's real. Gentech has created entire hospitals to house those affected, but it turns out being able to relive parts of your life and do things differently this time can become more addicting than any narcotic. People are addicted and turning their brains into mush. All of this is dangerous information to have. I wasn't supposed to see it. Someone made a mistake. I found this about 3 months ago. When I looked at the data, I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't know what to do with the information. Who do I send it to? To my surprise, Lord showed up at my desk one afternoon. I thought I was in trouble, but instead he said something about how he noticed me around the office and wanted to know if we could get dinner together. I was shocked. I should have known. How stupid can one person be? I'm such a moron. I'm so stupid. Before I knew it, Lord and I were meeting up all the time. I spent the night at his apartment, and he'd call me into the office. One day, I got the chance to really search around his office. I found nothing, of course. Lord wouldn't keep details about the things Gentech is doing there, I suppose. I even got to sit for a redo session. He told me it was a treat. I think he downloaded a lot of my memories. Most people who have a redo session get a little dizzy and tired afterward. After mine, I couldn't remember anything about what they looked at. I didn't remember being involved in any past memories. I looked at the clock and realized I had been out for almost 24 hours. I realized they had duped me. Of course they had. I was so stupid, so convinced a guy like Lord just might be interested in a woman like me. He'd been just lulling me into a place where he could raid my memories. I knew I was in trouble then. I didn't know what he found, but I was sure it was bad. He was coming for me. I also started getting weird phone calls. Calls with someone on the other end breathing, but not saying anything. I could hear a television in the background, but not understand what it was. I started to plan. I created duplicates of the information contained on this drive. I planned to create a new identity and even picked a new country. I'd start in Thailand, then work from there. I was going to run for as long as I could and hope the information I sent to the press brought down Lord and Gentech. These people are dangerous. They have our memories. Do you understand that? Lord and Gentech are the most powerful person and company on the planet because they have the memories of the most wealthy and famous people in the world saved away. They've barely begun to tap into its potential. If I'm dead when you see this, I hope it was fast. I hope you can take what's here and do something. They're killing people. It's just gonna get worse. Please, stop them.
His brother doesn't just jump up and grab the rope from where he's standing, even though he could. His brother is 3 years older than he is, and a lot taller. Instead, for full dramatic effect, his brother makes his way to the far end of the loft. The boards creak ominously beneath him. Dust floats in the air, caught by shafts of light leaking through the slats of wood which comprise what's left of the barn. Now watch it, big baby. His brother starts to run. Instinctively, he knows something is not right. This shouldn't be happening. He should stop his brother, stand in front of him, scream, yell, call Mom. He's too scared to move. Daniel leaned back in his chair, wiping his eyes, cracking his neck. The chair groaned beneath him, which he felt was pretty much how he felt too. His head was fit to burst. "Well?" he asked. Jessica was still glued to her computer screen. Her eyes were wide, but held a mixture of shock and sadness. Twice he had caught her dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. He had had to step out of the office at one point himself to stand in the hall and weep. She saw him looking at her and popped the earbuds out. "Do you say something?" I just asked, well, what? Daniel stood up and cracked his back. "We've been at this for hours. What do we have and what can we do with it?" Jessica sighed and leaned back in her own chair. She added a yawn to all the neck and shoulder cracking. They had been rooting through the hundreds of digital documents and videos Laura Lee Bowling had stored in the tiny disk. The woman must have worked day and night, risking everything to get the information. How she had found some of it, got access to the places she did, Daniel did not understand. Once she started, she had become determined. Surely it was this determination which had gotten her killed. "We have enough information here to shut down Gentech," Jessica said. "She has video of them doing experiments with Redo on people in institutions. She shows us rooms filled with people who were utterly insane, babbling to the walls, or just catatonic. She shows documents indicating people have committed suicide when the insanity gets to be too much for them." Daniel nodded to all of this. They had printed out information, taping it up to the wall along with photos. They had not yet added the red yarn, but that was coming. He studied all the information, the duplication of documents and clips from videos. "None of this proves our case," Daniel said. "What?" "Our case. Remember? Our case? We're not here to take down Gentech. Yes, there's plenty here which could do that, but you know how guys like Lord are. They have a way of distancing themselves from everything here. We have nothing in here which indicates he somehow triggered Needham to go kill Bowling. Right now, despite all this, we just have the story of a man who snapped, suddenly remembered his childhood crush, and went nuts. The end result was a dead woman." Jessica moaned. "You're right. We have nothing to really nail Lord with. Enough to put a lot of people out of work here, but nothing that can lock him up in prison. I can see him right now with an army of lawyers testifying before Congress, telling people he was taken advantage of by people he trusted. The company files for bankruptcy, and hundreds of people end up out of work." "Exactly. What do we need? We still need to prove Needham had any contact with Gentech, Lord, or Redo. We need to know for certain he was receiving sessions, and with whom. If we can then connect that to Gentech and Lord himself, we've got a shot. He'll have another army of scientists saying what we're claiming is impossible, that Redo is nothing more than a game for the rich and a tool to help people with mental issues." Daniel leaned his forehead against the wall. The cement wall was nice and cool. "We're not going to get him, are we?" he asked. Jessica walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. "I'm not giving up, Dan. We have a lot here which we can use to damage Lord. We have leverage." Daniel shook his head. "He's too powerful. He'll slip out of the noose. He needs to know what might be coming down on him. Lord had to have made mistakes. Would he have met with Needham himself? Think about it." Daniel ran a hand over his chin. So much stubble. "He seems like the type of person who would hire someone, keep his distance. But he got involved with this one personally. He slept with her, for crying out loud. If he was willing to do that, he'd want to handle turning Needham into a weapon himself." "You think Needham's roommate would have seen Lord?" Daniel shook his head. "No, but maybe he drove a fancy car or sent a limo for him." Jessica looked at her watch. "It's late. I don't think we should head over there tonight." For the first time, Daniel looked at his watch. It was almost 11. Where had the day gone? "We'll head over tomorrow morning." Jessica gathered her stuff. Daniel studied the files and materials scattered across the conference room table. It was too much. Were they just chasing their tails? "You have any regrets, Jessica?" She paused at the door, a puzzled look on her face. "What are you talking about?" Daniel waved a hand at the papers on the table. "You know, a memory of something you wish you could do over again. Maybe see how it would have turned out if you did something differently." Jessica laughed. "Who doesn't? A few days I'd do something different. Probably more than a few. You?" Daniel paused, chewed at his lower lip. Yeah, definitely. I can see the appeal of this." They walked out together. "I see the appeal, but I'm just not sure it's right." We make our choices and we live with the consequences. That's how it should work. Daniel arrived at home and found a large box waiting for him. It had the bright blues and yellows indicative of a Gentech box. He had seen the images on television and in magazines, but never up close. He studied the box and laughed. That son of a bitch. Lord had sent a redo, just like he promised. He bet Jessica was finding a similar box on her front porch across town. Daniel bent down, picked up the surprisingly light box, and carried it into his apartment. He set the box down on the ottoman in the living room and then went into the kitchen to make himself some dinner. He sat down in front of the box while eating, staring at the box. The temptation was real. He did his best to watch the news and not open the box to try out Redo. It was supposed to be done with a technician. Daniel wondered if this was the latest upgraded model, which could be operated at home. He had heard the rumors such a thing was coming. Once Daniel finished his dinner, he put the dishes in the sink, then poured himself a very stiff drink. Lots of whiskey, a little ice. He sat down in his chair and stared at the box. Tempting, but he knew it was a bad idea. Doing this would give Gentech his memories, and his memories were his. Memories of his brother. Memories of that day. Daniel downed the liquor, poured himself another. He refused to let himself get drunk, but the sharp blades of those memories were cutting him again. He had to tamp them down. He could live with the existing scars, but didn't need to create more. Nope. He downed the second drink and addressed the box. No, not tonight. Not ever. That declaration over, Daniel rinsed his glass in the sink and headed off to the bedroom. The television in there worked just as well. The world slows down. He watches his brother run and run, his legs pumping, a look of total determination on his face. This is wrong. He knows. This is all going to go wrong. His brother reaches the end of the loft and leaps into the air. For an amazing moment, he appears to be floating, legs up, arms up, reaching. He grasps at the frayed rope over his head, the momentum of his body carrying him forward. He looks up and sees just how frayed the rope is. It's barely secured to the beam. Why didn't he notice earlier? Why didn't his brother? He opens his mouth to scream, but he can tell it's already too late. Slow motion, but happening too fast. Needham lived in what was essentially a halfway house. It was an apartment complex located in a shitty part of town specifically meant for people being treated with mental illness to reintegrate into society. Each apartment housed 2 people, while medical staff also lived and worked close by. The staff gave medications at all hours, video surveillance monitored the apartments, and each resident wore digital trackers. Of course, those only worked so well since Needham's tracker had gone missing and was not attached to him when he killed Lori Bowling. We're still looking into how this happened, Detective. The man talking was a lot like the man the detectives had spoken to at Gentech. He had similar glasses and a bald head. He wrung his hands nervously. The trackers aren't supposed to be removable. Did he have visitors in the past few weeks? Jessica looked ahead, studying the door frames of each apartment they passed. Did he leave the property for any reason? The little man wrung his hands. Well, they're not supposed to have visitors, and you can see we monitor everything. As I said, we've launched an internal investigation into this entire incident. We don't know how it happened. It's just horrible. Yes, it is. Daniel didn't want to listen to this turd talk anymore. He just wanted to discuss things with the roommate and get out of here. Is his roommate sane? The man sputtered, did a kind of spit take. Well, all of our residents are undergoing treatment of some kind. Mr. Dorning has bipolar disorder and some dissociative problems. He's under medication and has been taking his pills. So he's crazy, but who knows if he'll be able to understand what's happening? Jessica had a way of cutting through the bullshit. They finally stopped in front of a red door. The little man removed a key card and flashed it in front of a black plate. The door beeped and opened inward. Daniel and Jessica stepped inside a neat apartment where the walls, furniture, and carpet were almost blinding in their whiteness. Mr. Dorning, these are the detectives I told you about. The little man nodded toward another man with messy blonde hair and bright blue eyes sitting on the sofa. Do you remember? Of course I remember, you asshole. I'm crazy, not senile. Dorning cast a glance at Daniel, rolling his eyes. Can you believe this guy? Daniel stifled a laugh. Thank you for showing us here. Jessica intervened, putting a hand on the little man's arm. Can we have time alone with Mr. Dornan? It'll probably be better that way. The little man looked even more nervous. He was told to stay with them, Daniel guessed. You can watch via the cameras if it makes you feel better. Daniel showed the man his pistol. We're also armed. Showing off the gun seemed to upset the man, who mumbled half-hearted warnings, then backed out of the apartment. He slammed his fingers in the door as he closed it, let out a yelp, and shut the door. Good job showing that twerp the gun, Dorning said. The man's afraid of his own shadow. Thanks for talking to us, Daniel said, taking a seat in a leather chair without being asked to do so. Dorning gave a slight nod. I was wondering if anyone would come back and talk to me. When you guys came around here the first time, that asshole wouldn't leave. I don't feel comfortable talking with him around. Why is that? Jessica adjusted the crease in her slacks. He only cares about making this entire place seem like a success. Goddamn doctors. They think they know better all the time. Look at all the video surveillance and other bullshit, and Bo still got out. He was gone all the time over the last few months. I knew it was bad news. I knew he shouldn't be getting in that car. But did anyone want to listen to me? Oh, of course not. I'm the crazy one, right? Dan and Jessica exchanged a quick look. What car? Daniel prodded. Dorning reached into his pocket. For a moment, Daniel was worried, but then he pulled out his cell phone. He took a moment to call up a photo, then turned the screen to face the detectives. This car. He looked very satisfied with himself. For weeks before he went off and apparently killed that woman, he was meeting up with someone in this big, fancy car. He'd be gone all night, then come home in the morning all exhausted and with bruises or burns around his head. Daniel leaned forward. It was some kind of big 4-door car. Perhaps a Cadillac? Can you send that to me? He asked and gave his email address. A moment later, Daniel's phone dinged. Thank you. Was Bo taking his medication? Jessica kept her head down on her notepad. Not the last few weeks. He told me he was undergoing some kind of new treatment. Something with a thing on his head and memories. Said he didn't need to take the medication anymore. He just got crazier and crazier. Started to even scare me. Did he talk about Lori Bowling? Daniel asked, while also studying the image on his phone some more. The image was too small, but something about the man behind the wheel was familiar. All the time. He started talking about how they had gone out in school. The way he told it, they were hot and heavy, really in love. Then she broke his heart, and he said things turned to shit in his life shortly after. Was he violent? Dorning shook his head. Not for most of the time I knew him. He could get manic and a little out there, but he never talked about being violent. The moment he became obsessed with this Lori girl, he suddenly got very violent. You can look at the wall near the bedrooms there. He punched a hole in it. Did you try to report this to the people running this place? Jessica flicked her eyes toward the bedroom hallway. Of course, but they didn't believe me. They said the video surveillance would show he was leaving the apartment, but nothing did. I don't know if they even checked. They just dismissed me. Daniel gestured toward Jessica, just a waggle of his fingers. Time to move this along. Thanks for talking to us, Mr. Dorning. Jessica produced a business card and handed it over to the man. This is my number. If you think of anything else you'd like to tell us, this is the place to reach me. They left fast. As they walked back toward the entrance, Daniel studied the walls and ceilings of the complex. There were dark glass bubbles installed there indicating cameras. From what Daniel could tell, they covered every square inch of the place. They would need to view this. Plus, they'd need surveillance from every other business with a camera near here. We're gonna need to get all of this. Daniel waved at the cameras. Jessica muttered her affirmation. I think I see something in this photo, too. I better call Larry. He's gonna have to do some work here to clean up this image. Larry Wilkins liked his room dark. He played up the whole idea of being the weird tech guy to the hilt. He closed his windows, kept the lights dim, and his hair greasy. The moment Daniel entered the room, however, his face brightened and he smiled. Well, if it isn't my favorite detective, he said. What you got for me? Daniel showed him the image on his phone. Can you enhance this at all? If I can make out the driver or something specific about the car, it would help. Not sure I can do much with a shitty image like that, but I'll try. Just send it over. I need it fast. Larry sighed. Always do. Daniel and Jessica were back in their conference room when one of the deputies stopped by to tell them the footage from the video surveillance cams at the halfway house, plus all the buildings in the area with their own cameras, were ready. They had asked for footage in a 10-block radius for a start. Thanks, Norm, Daniel said. Send it over to us. Moments later, the files were loaded to the network, and moments after that, the detectives were studying hours and hours of footage. It was going to be a long night. It was 2 a.m, and Jessica had fallen asleep in the chair next to him. Daniel's eyes felt like they were turning to dust in his skull. His phone gave him a notification he had a new email. Larry was working late too, apparently. Daniel opened the email and then the photo. His eyes widened. His hand snatched out and slapped Jessica on the shoulder. She moaned, her head rolling around on her neck. He slapped again. Aunt, stop hitting me, Jesus! What? Daniel shoved the phone into her face. Jessica wiped her eyes, and it took a moment for her vision to focus. Is that? Yeah, let's get back to the other footage. If we can see him better in one of those, we can really nail him. His brother keeps swinging out. It feels like he will never stop swinging into the wide open air. When the rope snaps over his head, he can barely hear it over the roaring of his own blood in his ears. He opens his mouth to scream, but it's already too late. He sees his brother sail into the open air, much further than intended, sending him past the pile of hay. His brother's legs and arms flail in the air, a look of pure terror on his face. He sees his brother's eyes, clear as day, lock onto his own. His brother knows this will be bad, but neither knows just how bad. Time freezes for a moment. Then his brother falls down below the level of the loft. He hears the sound of him hitting the ground. It's the most horrifying thing he ever hears, ever sees. They found the video they wanted hours later. The image of the car and driver is as clear as day thanks to a video surveillance from a high-rise apartment building 3 blocks from the halfway house. It's almost as if he was posed for it. "You think we should get back up?" Jessica asked as they drove out of the station parking lot. "But this guy, no. He'll crumble the moment we flash our badges. Probably confess everything." Jessica studied Daniel's face as they sped along the roads. "You don't think he's really the one who did this?" "Oh, he did it. He set the wheels in motion with Needham, or arranged for it, but I'd bet 5 years of my salary Lord was the one who pushed him into doing it." "So you're already thinking about cutting a deal with this fucker?" Daniel shrugged. "Don't you think he'll crack pretty fast once we start laying out the evidence?" "I hope so." They arrived 10 minutes later, silently, having left the lights and sirens off. Daniel showed his badge to the man at the front desk, and they headed up to the 20th floor. The hallway was cool and quiet, lined on either side by apartments. All of them, at this height, have spectacular views of the city. The one they want is at the far end of the hall. "Eric Newman," Daniel announced to the door, then knocked. "Newman, it's the police. Open up." There's no response, but they can hear noises from within. "The television?" Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Newman, come on, open up." She got her gun ready, as did Daniel, and held up a key from the front desk to let them into the apartment. Nothing. Just more sounds from inside, which might have been a television. "Guess we go in." Daniel inserted the key card into the slot. The light turned green, and the 2 detectives stepped inside, guns drawn and ready. Jessica held a hand up to her nose. Daniel smelled it a second later. The coppery smell hit him first, then the other smells. Piss. Shit. "God damn it," Daniel muttered and ran into the living room. "Jesus, Danny, stop!" Daniel burst into the living room. A wide, white, luxurious sofa extended almost the entire length of the room. One entire wall was floor-to-ceiling windows, and the city twinkled beyond. Distantly, the blinking light of an airplane crawled across the sky. Daniel took all of this in along with the gore fest on the couch. There wasn't much left of Eric Newman's head. Most of it was splattered across the back of the sofa, the dining room table just behind it, and all over the floor. Much of it was a dark red, almost black. He had done this a while ago. As Daniel went one way around the couch, Jessica went the other way. The huge double-barreled shotgun was still in his lap, but leaned precipitously to one side. They could still smell the powder in the air. "He's wearing redo." Jessica still held one hand up to her mouth and nose, her gun pointed at the carpet. "Was he doing a session when he blew his fucking head off?" Daniel asked. The headset was still there, although the blast had destroyed the attached goggles. The metal headband was slightly askew, looking like a half-assed halo. Daniel turned to see what the man had been staring at before he killed himself. It was a flat-screen television set against the windows. How anyone would stare at the screen instead of the window was beyond Daniel, but there it was. "This isn't on a station." He indicated the television. He looked at the screen, which appeared to show the interior of the room they stood in right now. Then he studied the body, the position of the hands, the headset. There was a control console on the table in front of Newman. "This is a new version of Redo." Jessica studied the console. It was very elaborate and nothing like the version either of them had seen before. "This must be the new set so you can do it at home and not need a tech." He wasn't going through a full session. Daniel turned his gaze back to the television screen. He downloaded something. He downloaded whatever he was doing before he crashed. Jessica touched the console screen. The scene changed on the television. He recorded a goddamn message by downloading it here. For fuck's sake, downloadable suicide notes. After a moment, she was able to get the screen to start playing the message.
Hello, my name is Eric Newman. I've been the public relations director for Gentech for almost 7 years now. I'm recording this because I want this to be my confession.
The memory was from his perspective, but he had put a mirror on the table to talk into. Daniel found it on the floor in front of the coffee table. He must have kicked the table when he blew off his head. His eyes on the video looked dazed, wide, unemotional.
I knew that our employee Laura Lee Bowling had been having an affair with our CEO, Del Lord. I had always been in love with Lori. For years, I tried to just keep it to myself, but my jealousy grew out of control.
He licked his lips, shifted on the sofa. The barrel of the shotgun drifted into view, touching his leg. His eyes flicked to the side, as if noticing the gun there for the first time.
Everyone at Gentech gets to have a redo session. It's one of the perks. I knew Lori had, and I accessed her memories. I was able to figure out there was a boy back in her junior high days who had a huge crush on her. I then used knockoff redo versions on this man, a mentally unstable man. I got him to stop taking his medication and made him believe he and Lori had had a relationship back then. It was all lies. I manipulated him illegally using faulty equipment to turn Bone Needham into a weapon.
He wiped at his eyes.
I've been living with that for a while now. I've been led to understand there are police on their way here tonight to arrest me. I can't be arrested. I can't be in prison. But I also can't live with the guilt. This is my only way out.
He sighed, picked up the shotgun.
I want to stress this was all me. I was the only one involved. No one else at Gentech had anything to do with this. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused.
Newman turned his head away from the mirror, and the image filled with the view of the double-barreled shotgun pointing at his face. With a half-second of explosive sound, the image cut out. God damn it, Daniel whispered. God damn it. Daniel and Jessica sat in the chief's office 4 hours later. Both of them were tired, and both had headaches. They had just spent the last 4 hours at the apartment while the forensic teams did their thing. Everything pointed to a suicide. Already, the recording had been analyzed and determined to be legit. There were other detectives combing through Newman's house and his office. So far, all the details pointed to him doing exactly what he said he had done in his suicide recording.
I think you guys need to finish your reports and close this out,
the chief said with a sigh.
Detective Vernon, I can see the look on your face. You want to keep going at this until you get something on Lord. Stop it.
I have something on him. Daniel slapped his hand on his knee, his eyes red, face pale. He was so tired, but he burned with anger. We have recordings showing all the stuff the company's been doing. Some of it, most of it, has to be illegal.
Do you have any idea how powerful Lord is? Think about it, Detective. If he has all the richest and most powerful people in the world's memories saved away in hard drives, you don't think he can find a way to get out of this? He's on at least 4 presidential advisory committees. He probably texts the actual president every goddamn day. You think he won't wiggle out of this before the day's over?
Daniel sighed and rubbed his eyes. So, he's just gonna get away with this?
We have someone for the crime. As far as the rest of the world goes, Newman is the murderer. Bowling's family can rest at ease. This is a closed case. Period.
Daniel looked at Jessica. She appeared half asleep, but shrugged at him. He has a point, Dan. We can sit here and argue about this all night, or just fill in our reports, close it out, and move on. She waved a hand. I want to go home, maybe sleep for 4 days. The chief nodded vigorously.
Yeah, take the rest of the week off. There'll be plenty of fresh cases ready for you when you get back. Focus on helping other people. This is a done deal.
Daniel shook his head, but he knew there was nothing else to be done. He stood up and walked to the door. Vaguely, he heard Jessica follow him. He reached for the doorknob.
Detective.
Daniel closed his eyes. He was so done with this. Yes?
I'd get rid of all that stuff you got from bowling. It would be ill-advised to send anything to, say, the press.
Right. Finally, he was out the door and walking to his desk. Daniel moved fast, irritated to the point of wanting to punch walls. He heard Jessica moving just as quickly behind him, her heels clicking on the tile. Daniel. Daniel. Daniel! What? Daniel reached his desk, grabbed his coat. He turned to face Jessica. What? What are you going to do? I can see it in your eyes, too. You're gonna do something. I'm gonna go home. I'll drink a beer or 6 and then pass out in bed. Tomorrow, I will try to decide if being a cop is really what I want to keep doing with the rest of my fucking life. We do the best we can. Jessica put one hand on his. We do what we can, and we close out the cases the best we can. Guys like Lord are just too big. The stuff on that disc should destroy him. We haven't even analyzed all of it. We were busy looking for a murderer. For all we know, none of the stuff she found can actually be tied to Lord. He always has a way to cushion himself from this kind of shit. If you take down his company, you just out hundreds, maybe thousands of people out of work. Daniel studied her eyes. He knew her well enough to know this was eating at her too, but she was also more cynical than he was. She was tired and not a crusader. I understand. He put his own hand over hers. I'll be fine. I'll see you next week. She smiled, seemingly reassured. Daniel hoped he sounded convincing. His brother hit the floor hard. He heard the crack. There was no sound after. It took a long time for him to come forward and peer over the edge of the loft. His brother was in the far corner, near where the wall and floor met. His body did not look right. It took another few minutes before he finally ran for his parents. He came in through the door, and Daniel watched him as he put his coat on a hook, took off his shoes. The man sighed. Must be tiring, he thought, dealing with Newman and his suicide. Embarrassing, but it could be dealt with. Del Lord turned on the lights without a word, checking his mail and not looking up. Good evening, Mr. Lord, Daniel said. Lord jumped, the letters falling from his hands. What? Hey, why are you here? Get out! Daniel held up a small device. It was a gift he got from his tech friend at work. He clicked a button. The door made a loud sound as the lock latched. There, now you'll stay here. And it disables the cameras all over this place, so we can chat in private. Hello, Mr. Lord. I wanted to talk to you. Why are you here? I could have you fired, you know. This is harassment. This is illegal. Shut the fuck up. Daniel stood and walked over to Lord. He reached into his coat pocket and was gratified to see Lord flinch. He pulled the small memory card out. This is the memory card Lori Bowling swallowed the night she came home and you sent Needham to kill her. I had nothing to... I thought I told you to shut up. I meant it. The two men stared hard at each other. Lord blinked first. Sit down, Mr. Lord. Lord ground his teeth, his jaw working like it was on a piston. However, he dropped his mail on a nearby table and strode into the living room. He sat down in one of the comfy chairs, crossed his legs. You can't do anything to me, Detective. Even I know that much about the law. You being here violates the law in a much greater way than anything I've done. Daniel set the tiny SIM card on the table near where Lord had placed his mail. He walked into the living room too, taking a spot across from the man. I know, but I'm not here as a cop. You made things pretty neat. The case against you and Lori Bowling will end with Eric Newman. Marvelous job. Lord smiled. I don't know what you're talking about. I feel bad for her family and the very disturbed man I hired. Daniel held up a hand. Save the fucking speeches for your board meetings and parties. You and I both know you're the one who got Needham to kill her. You used the data you gathered from Lori when you did a redo session with her. Remember? The one she talks about on that card, where she loses a few days' time. You're the one who found Needham. How long did it take? You had to find someone who would go crazy for Lori, and you found a mentally disturbed person from her past. Luck, I guess. Lord opened his mouth, probably to protest, but Daniel held up his hand again. The look on his face caused Lord to snap his jaw shut. You had to put someone between you and the crime, so you used whatever you had on Newman to get him to do it. I don't know what that was, and probably never will, but he was already loyal. I'm sure you didn't need to push him too hard. He brought Needham to his illegal redo sessions, which is how you weaponized him. Daniel sighed. It took time, though, and that entire time, Lori was gathering information. Maybe you were too distracted by orchestrating Needham and Newman. Maybe running a company takes more work than I realize, since it seems to me you just sit on your fat ass while everyone else works themselves to death to make you richer. Daniel smiled, almost daring Lord to speak. Instead, the CEO straightened his tie and cleared his throat. You have no idea how much she has on there, do you? She has proof of reduced psychosis, video of the insanity wards where people babble or stare at the wall, pages and pages of memos from you to people all over the world, the experiments involving turning people into assassins, implanting suggestions, erasing memories. There are the details about how you're the one putting defective redo devices on the street. The knockoffs? Most of them are from Gentech. You make the money and gather more data. You've gathered data and memories from world leaders, mafia men, criminals of all kinds, all over the world. You say the data is deleted, but Lori Bowling has proof here that this isn't so, is it? Lord became more and more pale as Daniel talked. He licked his lips. I don't know. Don't talk. I have all of it. Hell, there are pages I haven't even looked at yet. I bet you have buffers for a lot of this, too. You have people in prominent places you can blackmail, and lawyers enough you could circle this block 3 or 4 times, right? Lord said nothing, but the hate in his eyes was clear. Daniel stood up, walked over to where the SIM card lay. My chief says nothing can be done with this. He wants me to destroy it. Instead, I've made copies. Lots and lots of copies. I tell you this because my health is suddenly very much your concern. I get a severe cold that turns into pneumonia and I die. The data goes out. All over the world. He turned back around, a smile on his face. But here's the thing. You don't deserve to sit here in your fancy penthouse and run a $1 billion company. Not after what you did and what you've done. So, you have a deadline, Lord. You have 2 weeks to resign as CEO. I know, you'll work out a sweetheart deal to step down so you'll still be richer than shit, but it's something. Lord laughed. What are you going to do, Detective? I own much of the press in this world, you know. I am on the board of the biggest publications and newspapers on the planet. I can influence the rest. The best you can do is end up getting this story on conspiracy blogs." Daniel laughed along with him, but so loud it shut Lord up. "You're funny. You're also right. However, there are still a few journalists out there who might at least probe a little. Plus, you're international. There have to be law enforcement agencies around the world who would love to start investigations, and I might even be able to find a senator who might want to start something. Imagine testifying in front of Congress, huh?" Daniel rubbed his hands together. He laughed again. "Plus, as I said, you have memories from mobsters, gangsters, dictators. Imagine what might happen if the mob, or North Korea, or a few other despots were to even hear a rumor you might have dirt on them. What might they do just to be safe? Those guys don't worry about warrants and laws, do they?" Lord's face fell. "So, turn in your resignation. Use any excuse you want. Tell them you want to spend more time with family, or want to start a family. Tell them anything. Just resign." Lord clenched and unclenched his fists. "I will hunt you down. If anything happens to me, hundreds of copies of Lori Bowling's files go out to all kinds of people, some of them via good old-fashioned snail mail. You can't hack and erase those." Lord snarled. "Fuck you." "Here, you can keep this," Daniel said, indicating the SIM card. "I have just so many copies of everything on here. So many." Daniel extended both hands out to his side. "I trust you'll do the right thing, Lord. If not, well, then I guess I will. I'll make it my life's work to take down Gentech and ruin your life." He tilted an imaginary hat brim toward the CEO, then turned toward the front door. He knew Lord was back there trying to shoot daggers through his back via his eyes, but he didn't turn around. He was in the elevator moments later.
"What did you do, Daniel?"
Jessica asked over the phone. "Keep your eye on the news," Daniel replied. "I think you'll find our Mr. Lord suddenly has other things to do besides run Gentech."
"Is that really justice for Lori?"
"I don't know. Probably not, but it's something. God damn it, it's something." Daniel sat at his desk back in his tiny apartment. He had been in 2 enormous apartments high in the sky, and his little place seemed so pathetic by comparison. Spread out on his desk was the redo set Lord had sent him. His glass of whiskey sat near his right hand. He wiped at his eyes, then studied the photo he had kept with him for over 30 years. It was taken when he was only 5 years old, back in the days when he and his brother were attached at the hip. He worshipped his older brother and thought he ruled the world. Then came the day in the barn. The day his brother wanted to jump into the pile of hay using a frayed rope. His parents never got over his brother's death. Daniel supposed he never did either. He studied the redo helmet and the small console. It seemed pretty easy to use. The directions were simple. He just needed to think about the memory and plug the thing in. The computer did the rest, somehow reading his brainwaves and translating the memory to something he could relive in 3D. Doing that wouldn't be hard, since not a day had gone by in 30 years where he hadn't thought about his brother's death. Should he really do it? It would be nice to know what might have happened if he had done something else. If he had stopped his brother somehow, maybe things would be different. Did he dare download his memories into Lord's system? Did it matter? And what about the addiction? Would being able to experience something different from what had happened send him into a spiral of never wanting to take the helmet off? Again, did it matter? "I miss you," he told the photograph. "Every day." Daniel downed the last bit of whiskey in his glass. "What the hell?" he said. Daniel grabbed the helmet and put it on his head. Let's see what happens. He turned on the machine. A solution to one mystery. But the questions we have in our lives are never-ending. Something we can live with during the day, but not so much when the night comes out. You've been listening to When the Night Comes Out, a weekly horror anthology podcast with stories by Brian W. Alaspa and narrated by Allie James. Music by Kevin MacLeod. For Brian's work, visit his website at brianwalaspa.com or visit amazon.com for his books of fiction and nonfiction. Be sure to listen to Allie's work on Facebook at Allie James Projects. Visit our website at whenthenightcomesout.com to learn how to support us on Patreon.